I call Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My phone back together here. It's with mixed feelings, actually, that we rise to take a call on behalf of New Zealand First on the Local Government Auckland Transitional Provisions Amendment Bill. And I say with mixed feelings because it could have been a sweeter moment had we gone through the process. So I want to cover off. Start by saying that let's be very clear about New Zealand First position when it comes to super cities. New Zealand First is not a supporter of the changes that were enacted in 2010, the creation of the Auckland super city. We never ever bought into the arguments that by lumping all of those city councils in together, we would see improvements in efficiency, we would see reductions in staffing levels, that we would see reductions in overheads, that would see reductions in rates, that would see reductions in the rate of increases of rates, that we would see greater cohesion. We never bought any of that argument because for many people, a bit of common sense tells you that the bigger those things are, the more difficult they are to maintain, and the further away the governance moves from the people. There is ample evidence internationally, and in fact, if one has a look at what's happening in Brisbane right now, where they are de-amalgamating because they have learnt the lessons the hard way, it was always written that the Auckland super city, which the national government, supported by Rodney Hyde, created, was always going to fall short of the claims being made that justified its creation. And so it's no surprise when I got a hold of this bill and started doing a little bit of research to find, as has already been mentioned here a couple of times, that in the 6 years, it's only 6 years that the Auckland super city has existed, or since the legislation was passed anyway. In the short 6 years, this Parliament has redressed that legislation no less than 16 times. And here's the prediction. We predict this is not the last Local Government Auckland Transitional Provisions Amendment Bill that we will see. We predict that there'll be more yet to come as more of the worms sort of start creeping their way to the surface, and as Auckland City continues to make known to the government that there are flaws that need redressing. This is one such flaw. It's an issue that New Zealand First understands, we empathise with. What we don't empathise with is the way in which this legislation has been progressed through the House. And in fact, we said so in the second reading, I think during the committee stage, that the huge irony of what has happened here over the last couple of days has been in this simple fact. This legislation seeks to correct faulty hearings processes and seeks to enhance them. The irony is that the process by which the government has chosen to do that by doing it under urgency, has actually denied the people of Auckland their opportunity to have a full democratic process through which they would be heard. In fact, in short, it has kneecapped the hearing process here in Parliament by putting it through urgency. Why? Well, we don't know why, Mr. Speaker. There's actually nothing in this legislation. Normally, when there's urgent legislation, a government brings urgent legislation to the House, it is critical, it is crucial. Something has happened quite momentous. Something is sailing on a timeline and it has to be corrected very, very quickly. We don't see that in here, it's controversial. Hugely controversial, and the government wants to get it done and dusted really quick to avoid all of the backlash in the public arena and the political debate. But none of that exists here. And in fact, had there been a select committee process, you would have had a rather unique situation where 100% of the House voted in favour of the bill. So I guess we suspect here that there's people sitting behind the scenes, whether it's the Leader of the House or the Deputy Prime Minister or senior cabinet minister, scratching their head, wondering what the heck it was that Nick Smith told them that convinced them that this bill needed to be done through urgency. And I got a sneaking suspicion that people will be asking Nick Smith when he gets back from down the West Coast, well, what was the issue? Why could this bill, having been introduced in September, not have gone to the Local Government Environment Select Committee? I mean, you've got a very, very good select committee there. It works in a very collegial manner, chaired very well by Scott Simpson, backed up by Todd Mueller very, very well. And the committee actually functions exceedingly well. Some might even say too well, Mr. Speaker, because it is a joy to go along with that committee. So there's no reason why the government should have feared putting this bill into the committee and said to the chairman, Mr. Scott Simpson, look, we really need to turn this around. There are some tight deadlines, timelines, but we actually want to get a hearing. Give it the full benefit of a hearings process, let Auckland people have their say, let the committee question the minister, question the department, question Auckland City Council, get a greater feel for what the issues are behind the legislation, get it reported back to the House, then we can put it through. And I know, Mr. Speaker, it would have gone through without any hassle at all. We certainly would have had shorter speeches on this side of the House because there wouldn't have been a lot more to say. And much of the debate around here has been about the process, which is the irony of the whole thing. So why it went through this process, I have no idea, but I'm pretty confident in the back of my mind that there are ongoing discussions and comments and questions being asked behind the government benches as to why the heck they did it themselves. The truth is, I'm just trying to read my own notes here. Oh, terrible when your handwriting's that bad. The truth is, given the way that the Local Government Select Committee operates, we could have done better. I've already covered that. So what are the changes? The changes, well, they've already been canvassed well. Replace the quorum. That's probably the one where New Zealand First signalled right at the outset that we had reservations about. Because, you know, a quorum of 2, if you need to take a pause, does that mean the whole hearing has to grind to a halt? It has to stop because one member has ducked out of the room? Whether it's to go to the bathroom or whether it's to take that urgent phone call from their partner or something's disastrous has happened and they've got to take the phone. The beauty of having a quorum of 3 is that one person can vacate the room and the hearing can continue. The other issue of having a quorum of 2, and I don't know of anyone, I'd love someone to show me a trust deed or a company's, an incorporation's constitution where they actually have a quorum of 2. But take the next point. If you have a quorum of 2, there's a third person in there who's the chair, and the chair isn't able to be there, and only the quorum of 2 turns up, who becomes the chair? My pick is that they'll spend the first part of the meeting having a conversation about who's going to chair it. And of course, everyone loves to be the chair because they get to sit up there and have the TV cameras sitting on. They get to call the shots and decide who's going to be heard, who's not going to be heard, who's going to be curtailed, who gets the questions. So those conversations, it just seems rather pointless. So we've made that point. We didn't get satisfactory answers to that, we don't think. The other issues around increasing the number of appointed hearings panel members from 7 to 10, actually to 11, because it does include the chair. Sensible, given that the aim is to also allow concurrent hearings to be held, to validate the hearings that have already been held illegally. That's interesting. Don't know where else around the country a local government or territorial authority get away with that, but Auckland seems to have. Validate closing dates for submissions received between 14th of January and 28th of February, which again raises a whole bunch of questions which were never answered at all about those people who actually understood that the closing date was the 14th of January, thought that was it, didn't get their submissions, and only to now find that actually the submissions that were received up until 28th of February would have been legal because on the 19th of November Parliament made them so. I think there were a number of issues. The Phil Twyford SOPs that were put through, New Zealand First supported those. We thought they were sensible. We thought it was right and proper. Actually, a better fit that the Mayor, the duly elected representatives of the Auckland people actually have a say in who the Minister for the Environment appointed onto that panel. Regretfully, that SOP was rejected, as was Mr Twyford's other SOP, and we actually believe in New Zealand First that those 2 SOPs would have enhanced the legislation. Again, had we had a full select committee process, we might have been able to convince the government that those 2 SOPs weren't actually harmful. They did actually add to the quality of the bill, and given a bit more time, we might have actually convinced the Minister to go with it. We might have actually convinced the Minister actually not to drop the quorum from 3 to 2, to keep it at 3. We might have actually convinced the Minister with Mr Twyford's other supplementary order paper to replace clause 5, brackets 5, with the hearings panel being limited.
I'm sorry to interrupt the member, but his time has expired.